Have you noticed how every conversation online turns into a generational war? Boomers ruined housing, millennials destroyed industries, and Gen Z lives on their phones. But right in between all that noise, there's a generation that almost disappears from the conversation. Generation X. We were born roughly between 1965 and 1980. And we are the managers who quietly fix disasters before anyone even realizes there was one. And we are the parents who show up every day, pay the bills, and we handle everything. And we never demand recognition. We helped build the digital world, yet most of us barely exist on social media. And here is the part people rarely admit, that psychologically speaking, Gen X might be the most uniquely shaped generation still alive. And to understand us, you have to start with one defining reality. We grew up alone, not metaphorically, literally. The term was latchkey kids. And it wasn't rare, it was normal. Imagine it's 1979, you're 9 years old, and the school bus drops you off. You walk to your front door, and there's a key hanging around your neck on a shoelace. And you unlock the house. You step into the silence. There are no parents, no babysitter, no cell phone, no way to check in. So you make a snack and you turn on the TV. Maybe 4 channels if you're lucky. And you wait. You just wait. Literally. By the mid-80s, millions of children between 5 and 13 were regularly home alone after school. Millions. And that kind of environment does something to a developing brain. It teaches one lesson early and clearly that you are responsible for yourself. If something goes wrong, you deal with it. There is no texting for advice. There is no Googling instructions. No internet, no Google, no immediate supervision. And so you make decisions. And then you live with the consequences. Because when parents finally got home, discipline wasn't negotiated. It was direct. Cause, effect, done. Psychologically, that could be described as a high consequence environment. Action and outcome tightly linked. No caution. And when you grow up like that, your mind adapts. You start anticipating problems before they happen. You think ahead constantly. Not because you're negative, because that's how you stay safe. There is a practice in stoicism that is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of the evils. And so Gen X were practicing that without even knowing they were stoics. That's why so many Gen X adults seem almost instinctively prepared for crisis. And they're not pessimists. They're mentally rehearsing outcomes all the time. But there is also another layer. They watched institutions fail. They heard the speeches about loyalty and commitment. But then In reality, they saw that they were just speeches. And also they watched divorce rates skyrocket. And also they saw parents dedicate decades to companies only to be laid off during restructuring. I remember we watched political scandals unfold on television. I remember Watergate, Iran-Contra, Vietnam's aftermath. And the message for Gen X was subtle but powerful. Authority can't always be trusted. And systems aren't stable. And all those promises don't guarantee security. Now, all of that doesn't create cynics, but it creates stoics. Because Gen X learned early to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Not because we expect a disaster, but because history suggested that it's wise for us. And so that mindset builds emotional armor. From the outside, it can look like detachment, but in reality it's self-protection. And this is also explaining something else. Our complicated relationship with visibility. Because Gen X understands technology deeply. We were there when the internet was built. But we grew up in a world where privacy was default. When you embarrassed yourself as a teenager, it faded. It didn't live online forever. There was no permanent archive for every mistake. And so, broadcasting our life now doesn't feel empowering for many of us. It feels exposed. So we prefer to observe, to read, to stay informed, but we don't necessarily broadcast ourselves because we remember what anonymity felt like. And there's also some humor, some sarcasm, a kind of ironic distance. Because for us nothing is too serious. Everything can be a joke. And that didn't happen randomly. Imagine being a child during the Cold War, practicing nuclear drills in school, being told to hide under a desk if the unthinkable happened, living with the background awareness that global annihilation was theoretically possible any day. And yet adults acted calm. Everything is fine. And that split reality teaches you something. You learn to hold contradiction, to cope with humor, and to create emotional distance. So anxiety doesn't overwhelm you. And that distance became part of our personality. And that's again stoicism applied without us even knowing at that time that we were stoics. We were applying this distance. But there is also a paradox that despite instability, despite the institutional distrust, and despite this stoic emotional armor, Gen X developed a remarkably strong work ethic. Because we don't announce it, we don't brand it, and we don't post productivity philosophies on Instagram. We just execute. We do the job. we do what's needed to be done. Again, very stoic, isn't it? And this was shaped early too. Paper routes before sunrise, retail jobs in high school, and fast food shifts where you calculated change manually when the system failed. And so responsibility wasn't theoretical, it was practical. We saw corporate loyalty fail. And so we didn't attach identity to companies. Instead, we attached it to competence. If companies are unstable, then skill is security. We may not control layoffs, but we can control value. Again, it is stoic, isn't it? We can only control our character, our virtue. And so we as Gen X quietly made ourselves kind of indispensable. Because there is a duality at our core. A deep independence and a deep loyalty. We rarely ask for help. We've been solving problems solo since childhood. But when someone else needs support, we show up. We do. We do without announcing it, without documenting it. But we do. We show up. And friendships formed early out of necessity. Because when adults weren't around, peers became support systems. And that bond stayed. That bond stayed. And that is something that is very Gen X. Now, let's talk about authority. Gen X doesn't automatically respect titles. We respect competence. If you're competent, we'll follow you. But if you are all talk and no substance, we'll disengage. Not loudly, quietly. Because we've witnessed too many authority figures fail publicly. And so we learned early. Position doesn't equal wisdom. And economically, we've also endured multiple shocks, recessions at career entry. I remember the dot-com crash and the 2008 financial collapse. Repeated instability leaves psychological marks. And that's why we diversify income streams, for example. Not always out of ambition, but out of caution. Because we internalize the one rule, that nothing is permanent. Again, this is stoic, isn't it? The universe is change. Life is judgment, said Marcus Aurelius. Nothing is permanent. And we Gen X know that from our personal experience. And that survival instinct has also a cost. Because there has been researches that consistently have shown that Gen X is less likely to seek social support under stress. Not because we lack relationships, but because we were conditioned to handle things alone. And so self-reliance for us, it became identity. That makes us resilient in crisis. Yes, but sometimes that makes us isolated in struggle. Even our relationship with knowledge is different. Before search engines, information required effort. Think about it. You went to libraries, you searched the card catalogs, and you physically hunted for answers. I remember sometimes they never came. There was no way to get that answer. You didn't know who to ask. I didn't know who to ask. And so, when knowledge costs time and labor, it embeds differently. What else? We also learned hands-on problem solving. If you remember, your bike breaks, you fix it. Your TV malfunctions, you adjust it. And something fails, you experiment. And you keep experimenting until it works. And that built a mechanical intuition. A belief that the world is understandable with patience. Again, a stoic virtue. So, now, many of us are raising children in a completely different ecosystem. Constant supervision, digital footprints, and online exposure from birth. And so, we often overcorrected, giving our kids the attention that we didn't have. But sometimes, quietly worrying, have we removed too much friction? Because in the Gen X worldview, friction builds strength. This is my own opinion. And this is very Gen X. And so the reality is that Generation X may be the last group that clearly remembers this friction. Not only, we also remember the other side of this coin, that is boredom. Think about that. We remember boredom, long stretches of silence, solving problems without any instant answer. We couldn't Google it. And sitting alone with thoughts, just thinking. We were not superior to other generations. We were just shaped differently. We grew in the transition, analog childhood and digital adulthood, like me here holding this phone and talking to you. We are the bridge between two worlds, and the bridges rarely get celebrated. They just carry the weight. They hold the structure, and they stay steady. And that quiet steadiness, that might be the most defining Gen X trait of all. Let me know if this resonated with you, whether you are a Gen X or you finally understand someone who is. Consider subscribing, and I appreciate you being here. See you next. Aurelia, vieni qui! Bravo! Bravo!